introvert is somebody who derives their energy from himself, and an extrovert is somebody who derives his energy from the world around him. So go ahead.
You can define those things in that way, but introversion and extroversion that's the one aspect of personality that is scientifically measured and completely, it's understood scientifically. And introverts get nervous, they get overstimulated really easily. And extroverts kind of eat stimulation up. And the introvert is able to go concentrate.
I was noticing all the research that's out there. I mean, that's sort of one of my concerns about the system, is that it's, as soon as you come up with these terms, extrovert and introvert, which are relative in their definition, you start to come up with tests that you can take that put people into buckets where then you can find associations. And I think we sort of get lost in the mud when we say, well, an introvert's going to be more nervous and an extrovert, because like already we're sort of struggling with how do you define introvert and extrovert, not with what are their tendencies, but.
Well, I mean, my argument is that you can tell when a baby is 1 day old, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert.
Really?
Yeah.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, at least the argument that I found in this book called Personality Types and Owner's Manual is that you put it like you take a new toy, and you wave it in front of an extrovert's face, and they become like really interested in it instantly. And then after like maybe 30 seconds or after like a short period of time, they get distracted and they start looking at other things. With an introvert, if you take the same toy and wave it in their face, they start crying. After like a period of being upset about the new stimulation, then they start focusing intently on the toy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the sense that you see introversion and extroversion as being innate.
Yeah.
Whereas I'm gonna come down on the side of them being projected in a way, or to use a less loaded word, manifested. It's just we're continuing to define extroversion and introversion by what happens.
Yeah. You're more like wishy-washy about it.
Yeah, I would, I see every single person as a statistical point, and they add up to averages that, broadly we can split people into these categories and it'll work pretty well. But my goal is to sort of, get between the categories, to really sort of not see them as being so set in stone. Because
the point of type.
Because that's dangerous.
I know. That's the thing.
Because then you start to think it's science.
But you're worried so much about being dangerous that you're so nervous about whether it can be abused, whether Hitler's minions are going to be.
I'm worried. That's the Ethan's worried about something sound. Yeah, like I'm not. To me, distinctions between things are a source of enlightenment and salvation. I agree. That's what I like so much about Jung's system and the Briggs system, which is that they lay out these really nice categories. They make this really nice list. I'm sort of obsessed with lists.
Right. Well, if you're obsessed with lists, why are you so nervous about making distinctions?
Because I don't see lists as being reality. I see lists as being a way to split reality up. And it's convenient, but it's not truth.
Well, so lists are not true. But you love them anyway.
Yes.
Why?
Precisely.
Okay, well, what's the point of lists if there's no truth?
Because then we can have a conversation about it, like we're having right now.
So the whole point is to have a conversation.
Yes. To just continue making lists. But you gotta take the items in the list and make a list out of that thing. Right? Which is what we've kind of just done with introversion and extroversion. And if it's alright with you, I would really like to go into the four functions. I think this is where it gets kind of interesting. We started with extraversion and extraversion and introversion. Because these...
don't ever get that wrong, people.
Don't ever get that wrong.
Because there's gonna be some pedantic introvert who's gonna care.
These two attitudes drive the four functions. The four functions are thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition.
Yeah, that's their names. That's the names they were given. They have different names in different... There's a system called socionics.
Okay.
Which, it uses logic and ethics instead of thinking and feeling. And the feeling function has also been called the valuing function.
Okay.
Which is probably the best name. It's probably the most descriptive name for it, because feeling and sensation, in English, feeling and sensation are kind of like synonyms, or not synonyms, but they mean the same thing.
Right.
Isn't that what a synonym is?
Yeah. More or less. I noticed that these words. We really need to be careful how we define these. I mean, already with extravert, we come across something where these days extrovert is used to mean something completely different. Remember,
I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
People think of an extrovert as being somebody who talks a lot. Whereas Jung's definition, which is the definition we're talking about tonight, is somebody who...
But I think
who drives their energy.
I always thought they were conflating the same word. I didn't think they had two different words for it.
That's true, but they're severely limiting the definition by saying it's just somebody who talks a lot. It doesn't get at the whole idea of deriving your energy from the object, is how I would put it. So anyway.
Yeah. One of the things about... What's the question?
No, go on.
Shall we?
Just don't take us too far afield.
No, I mean, look, I'm trying deliberately not to take us...
Okay.
I'm really working.
I think your field is a little different than mine. I think you're operating on a whole different field.
Yeah, I'm on more of kind of maybe a cricket field.
I was thinking more of like an ocean field.
An ocean's worth of field, or literally an
ocean like a field that's like has waves in
it. So it's almost like whale polo. I'm playing whale polo.
Yeah. So let's start with this opposition between the thinking type and the feeling type. And remember, in Jung's theory, these two things are you're either an extroverted thinker or an introverted thinker, or you're an extroverted feeler. It's like the two extroversion and introversion sort of feed these functions. Thinking is a function. Extroversion is an attitude. Yeah,
I mean, one thing that hasn't been observed except by me in my lecture, and one time on my blog, is that a person can have a different IQ level in the extroverted and introverted versions of the same function. Like I myself have really strong extroverted thinking and really weak introverted thinking, and nobody's made that observation before, but I mean. As far as I know, I'm the only person to understand that.
Yeah, when I was listening to it, I thought about, like, emotional IQ and stuff like that. You're basically assigning, like an IQ to somebody's... So it's like, imagine capital T, lowercase e, that's like your extroverted thinking... What would you call that? A function? We can continue
Spock.
No, I don't mean give me an example. I mean, what do you call T lowercase e? Like, what is that? Is that a mode?
Thinking.
But like, what is it?
It's called a psychological function.
Okay, a psychological function. So your extroverted thinking could be really strong.
Yeah.
Whereas your introverted feeling could be really weak.
Or your introverted thinking could be really weak. You can have, my extroverted sensation is pretty weak, but my introverted sensation is very strong. And so it's actually, there's a lot to learn. It's kind of, you start by realizing there's eight functions. And the best book to read is called Personality Types and Owner's Manual.
Shout out! We don't have it. Yeah. That is our shout out sound.
Okay. So the Meyers-Briggs doesn't really get into the truth. It's a sort of a surface.
Yeah, we're gonna get to the Meyers-Briggs. I really want to make sure we give a good overview of these four functions because they're gonna come up again. So, from what I've read, thinking and feeling are considered rational functions, or judging functions.
Yeah.
Whereas sensing and intuition are considered irrational, or perceiving functions.
Yeah.
The first thought I had was, a lot of people think that feeling is irrational. That's something that sort of has plagued philosophy over thousands of years.
I know, and that's actually, like, a known dilemma that Jung, had to deal with, what Carl Jung had to deal with. So feeling is actually, I mean, the Indian subcontinent, I guess you would say, would be like the feeling center of the world. Like, the whole Indian culture is feeling oriented. And it's very paradoxical from our perspective. Like, we look at the Hindu religion and, it doesn't make that much sense to our logical Western minds. But but everybody has all of the functions.
Right. You have different grade, you have different graded. Like everybody has their own IQ in each of the 8 functions in Jung's system.
Well, in my addition to Jung's system.
Yes, right.
That's me.
You are an original, Zachary. Yay for Zach! That was a good choice. Alright, so I'm having a little bit of trouble with feeling. We've sort of been over thinking. Thinking is better. We all kind of know what thinking is. We can, I would imagine an extroverted thinker is somebody who thinks a lot about the world around them, and an introverted thinker is somebody who thinks a lot about himself. Yeah,
I mean, like, Eminem is probably the best go-to example.
Shout out!
Because Eminem needs the shout-out. Like,
he does. Everybody needs a shout-out. If you want a shout-out, write to us, and we promise we'll give it to you.
They're both, like, all...
So, let's talk about feeling, though. I want to get into feeling, because I don't quite understand what Jung meant by feeling.
Feeling/valuing / ethics.
Okay, so feeling is like something mixed up in morality. Like, if you're an extroverted feeler, you want to make sure everybody... You're very concerned with the degree the well-being of people around you.
The way I call it is, the feeling is about the degree of goodness, for the most part. It's about how good things are. And some things are really bad and other things are really good, but feeling gives you a sense of, something's, what something's worth.
Okay. That's valuable because the next word we're going to go into, sensation, is, generally speaking, people would think feeling and sensation are really related.
Yeah, but that's actually a Western problem. I mean, it's been pointed out that the word feeling was used as a meager substitute for what we would really call the function, because in our Western culture, the feeling function is so subdued. It's so oppressed.
It sounds like feeling is almost like love. Right.
Yeah,
whereas sensation you can take literally. Sensation is what you sense.
Yeah.
Versus intuition, which is what you kind of, or let's put it this way, if we're going to compare it with intuition, sensation is your,
Sensation is like nouns, things. Like the sense of the table in the room. It's about things. It's very objective. It has nothing to do with the value of something.
Right, whereas intuition would be more like you trusting the spirit and like sort of getting into the moment without thinking. Yeah, like without
the emotion and the abstract, like the things not directly apparent.
Yeah,
intuition is actually the hardest one to understand because it's the opposite of sensation, which is the easiest one to understand.
Yeah, that's true. Sensation. Well, thinking's easy to understand, but now I'm sort of finding myself thinking about the oppositions between these things, right? Because it's like thinking and feeling is one opposition, and sensation and intuition is the other. And again, my instincts as a Westerner, as a rational Westerner, is to compare intuition and thinking, right? Like you have your instincts and then you have your reason.
Oh yeah. So there's definitely a lot of conflated terminology. You know, one person will use the word intuition to mean, one thing, and it's like different from thinking. Intuition is often associated with unconsciousness, like you're not quite sure what happened. And the funny thing is, an intuitive type, if their main function is intuition, then it's a little strange to say that they're unconscious of the thing that they do. But at the same time, There's a degree to which that is actually true. Like, intuitive types have the hardest time explaining how they do what they do. I'm an intuitive type.
You identify as intuitive.
I'm an INTJ.
INTJ. Okay, yeah, I think we're about ready to go into Briggs. This is sort of the popular manifestation of Jung's system, and they added they gave it a little kick. They put a little kick into it.
No, they just created a test and came up with four letters. Everyone has 4 letters.
The kick I'm talking about.
Okay,
in case you didn't sense
there was more coming.
Kick of pepper. There's a little bit of paprika in here that I don't think you're tasting. Maybe I gotta splash a little bit more in there.
No, wait.
The kick is that.
Well, a kick should be accompanied by a sound, I would say. How about
That is me kicking Zach's face. All right. The way the Briggs system works is there's 4 letters. So when you hear people going around saying INFP, INT,
yeah,
Q,
this is common. This is relatively common.
It's pretty common. It's very popular these days. There's tests that you can take.
Yeah.
As much as you trust those. So.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's another thing to mention is that the tests are very often wrong. Especially P and J. The point I want to assert is that type for me is like a mystical reality that transcends a mere 70 questions that you fill out on a form.
Okay, I dig that. We'll come back to that. Deal? Okay. That was acquiescence from Zach.
No, just people love tests and they always assume that the test is the
I take that back. That was not acquiescence from Zach. What's my sound for? Zach's going on a tangent. All right. So the Briggs system, introversion and extraversion, like before, they're the attitudes that drive the next 2. As we've already spoken about, we have thinking and feeling and intuition and sensing. The little kick was they added judging and perceiving as the last letter, and it basically says which of the 2 prior letters are dominant, right? From what I understand, that if your last letter is J, thinking, feeling is dominant in you. If your last letter is P, then intuition, sensing. So that's P for perceiving and J for judging. Is that how you understand it, Zachary?
Yeah, but it's not really. There's a much. I understand it from the original Jungian perspective. Should I?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you should because, these are not terms that are immediately apparent in Jung. Jung has 8 personality types.
Yeah.
And the Briggs system has 16.
Yeah.
So people, my first question was, well,
yeah.
How did these come about? So you're saying that J and P originate from Jung's theory.
Yeah, so remember we said there's 8 functions. There's, there's introverted intuition, introverted thinking, introverted sensation, introverted feeling, and extroverted intuition, extroverted sensation, extroverted thinking, and extroverted feeling. That's 8.
Right.
Okay. So, everyone's type is determined by which of those 8 is their dominant function. Like, the point is the human ego attaches to one function, and that becomes their type. So you can be an introverted intuitive type, or an extroverted thinking type. And that's the main point. The 16, when it divides into, for each type, there's 2 variations, because you need more, the average human ego requires 2 functions to get by in the world. And they need a rational, what Jung calls a rational function and an irrational function. And whichever one's their dominant, like, intuition's an irrational function. And if that's my dominant, which means I need a second one, which needs to be rational. Like, so whatever if your dominant function is rational, your second function is going to be irrational. And if your dominant function is irrational, your second function will be rational.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but if I'm detecting you correctly, you're a little different than the Briggs system. So the Briggs system would say that...
I'll tell you what the Briggs system is. The J the P and the J is simply which one is used for extraversion.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
That's all they mean, which is why it's completely confusing because P and J won't accurately be detected because I'm an introverted intuitive, which means I'm an introverted perceiving type, and yet my score will be J because my extroverted function is rational.
Right.
So
okay, no, I see what you're saying. That is...
In other words, it's only the system's only really accurate for extroverts. Like the J and the P is only really going to test accurately for an extrovert.
Which is why you're against the test, because you don't think that it could
well, that's one of them.
Introverts.
That's one of, say, three big reasons.
What are the other two?
Tests are cool, if you're just trying to dip your toe in the water. But like the system, like, it's so much richer than that. You have sort of dual types. You'll get people who are strong in diverse areas, and they'll manifest both types to a certain extent.
So let me go back to your, I like the way you put it, that if you're a J, that means that you're extroverted, your intuition and, I'm getting these all mixed up.
If you're J, it means that your T or your F is extroverted.
Yeah, I need to mark.
If you're a P, it means that your S or your N is extroverted.
Okay, if you're a J, then your T or your F is extroverted.
Yeah.
And if you're a P, then your N and your S.
Your N or your S, whichever one you're using.
Yeah.
Basically, everyone has a T or an F, and everyone has an S or an N. And the J tells you which one of those is extroverted.
Yeah.
And the I and the E tells you whether you are extroverted or introverted.
So, I mean, my first objection.
Sustained.
So you're saying, so what, cannot somebody have extroverted, what are you doing, Zach? Can somebody not have both, like, you're saying if they're extroverted in one thing, they're introverted in the other.
Yeah.
Right? Can that not
how
have extroverted both ways? That's my first objection.
So everybody, at least in, the system that I use as my internal shorthand, like being a human is all about having sort of your extroverted side and your introverted side. And so what Carl Jung realized is that people who use a rational function for their extroverted side will use an irrational function for their introverted side. And that's
I guess I'm just wondering if that's always the case. I mean, I know, and the guy has tons of research to back him up. He's treated tons of patients, but the only problem I have is, like, we started off by creating we started off by defining 6 words, and now we're going to take those words and say that they're, like, we're going to position them in a way that is set in, like, it can only be this way, where it's like, what if both what if somebody is just an extrovert in everything? That's kind of what
They're not.
It's never like that.
No, there's just the sheer fact of, like, there's this kind of need to balance one's existence, and all humans, like, if you're a complete psychopath, or, if you're totally mentally ill, in other words, the people who have none of introversion or none of extroversion, like, for some reason, they can't exist at all in the world. They couldn't function at all.
What would happen to them?
I guess.
I mean, are those the people who commit suicide, who kill other people? That's what I'm trying to...
Well, I mean, dogs are, the typical dog is an extrovert.
Yes,
and
I get that.
And dogs are notorious for suffering from, like, they don't have a mind of their own. They just love you. They always want to they always are just victims to the ball. You throw the ball and they just can't help themselves. And so, I guess if you were like that all the time, then you definitely wouldn't ever make choices for yourself. You would always just be wherever you are. Honestly, that's like something that is said. Like, you can't have all introvert or all extrovert, and I understand that.
I get the dog example is good. I get that.
Yeah.
I get that. So, my next question is...
Even a cat needs to come out once in a while and nudge you. So a cat's typically an introvert,
Yes, all these things, we might imagine all these things existing as like a balance. Like, you're somewhere on the spectrum, right? Like, you're...
Yeah. And you need both to survive. You need both to survive. And that's actually the weird magic that Jung Jung observed was that people who use a rational function.
Okay, I know what my next objection is.
Sustained.
We need a sound technician. Zach and I can't focus on what we're talking about and what buttons he's gonna push. Alright. That's it. I'm calling it off. Okay. I lost my train of thought. Stop looking at the thing. Okay. Yes, I know what I was going to say. So, basically, in Jung's theory, since you have the two irrational functions and the two rational functions,
yeah,
and he's saying that those are always like some extroverted and some introverted. It's saying that nobody's ever 100% irrational. I think that's kind of what I'm reading.
Yeah, but also irrational is not really irrational. That's just the word he used. Like sensation and intuition are both means by which data is acquired. They're both perceiving mechanisms, and so you could just as easily use the word perceiving.
Right. So I could frame the argument the same way. Basically, he's saying that we're both perceivers and judgers, but like in balance. Like as your perceiving goes up, your judging goes down.
Yeah, and that's where the types come from. The 16 types are descriptions of every dominant function combined with the pair of all like secondary functions that they will use to balance themselves out. So an INTJ, I'm an introverted intuitive, and my dominant function is introverted intuition, but my secondary function is extroverted thinking.
I just think the system's weird. I mean, if I were Meyers-Briggs, I would have gone back and said that if you're, like, we should just have 3 letters and you should put one of them first, right? So you should be, what did you say, you're an INTJ?
Yeah.
Which means that you're judging, so you should be an ITN. That should be your thinking is actually, your thinking comes from outside.
INT. Like, I'm an introverted intuitive with extroverted thinking.
It's so confusing. I mean, you get that, right?
It's actually, that's what I like about it. It's confusing, but that said, that is a hint
that how
complicated human beings are.
Well, in that I would agree with you. Like, we started out by talking about how, we divide things up into lists and categories, and I think that these are all attempts to divide a world that's infinitely complex, but that instead of just dividing ad infinitum, we stop at a certain point, and Jung happened to stop at a point that was pretty close to that, like, infinite complexity that I'm talking about.
But you keep talking about, like, see, the way that Jung talked about personality types, and he wrote, this is what he said in the introduction to personality types. He said, when you're trying to help somebody, when you're a psychoanalyst and you're, like, trying to help somebody, you're already underwater. You're so confused so Jung's saying that the necessity of categories is to just give you something to hold on to in the midst of a sea of troubles. Mm-hmm. And so types that's what types are. Like, people who are worried that types are categorizing people, well, they aren't the people who are just, like, way underwater, who just need something to hold on to.
I see what you're saying. You're saying that types are a means to an end. That we cannot feel remiss that we have these types and we cannot feel bound by them. They're simply a way to understand people so that we can help them better.
Yeah, I mean, most people first get interested in types when they want to understand themselves. And the reason they want to understand themselves is because they've reached a certain point in their life where they feel different, and they feel like there's something different about them, but they don't have a language to describe it. And so it just seems kind of, you have to understand that's what Jung was doing. He was trying to give you some ideas to hang on to in the midst of complete confusion and.
So, I mean, to that I would just say, so what's so bad about the tests that are out there? Because, I mean, they're probably helping people figure themselves out. If that's really the purpose of them, why should we...
Yeah.
And...
Because, I've seen, there's nothing inherently bad about a test, what's bad about a test is the assumptions people make about the test. They believe that the test is the absolute truth.
Well, here's my thing, which I'll keep coming back to, which is that I think that no matter what you've identified as an INTJ, and I think you see that as the absolute truth, I see that as just as wrong as the person who takes a test and sees, like, either way, you're estimating something with something that's set in stone, right? You're cutting through the multiple and you're coming up with a list of 4.
Well, types is really interesting because I call myself a mystic, and when I was 20 years old, somebody gave me a hallucinogenic drug of some sort, and I saw, like, I passed through a circle and I saw a white light, and so I have this strong mystical background, but here I am standing and talking about how important types are and saying, like, these are really important categories, and, like, they basically help to explain so much of human behavior and so much of human misunderstanding of other human beings. And so, for me, types are like, they might seem like the opposite of a mystical.
They are. They are. A mystic would never bother himself with something that's so set in stone. But I admire the fact that you're sort of embracing this tension between mysticism and something that's really sort of scientific. And
it's not scientific enough.
It's rational. It's really sort of rational. Which is actually kind of interesting.
But the only explanation for that is that there is a logos. In the beginning was the logos. That there really is a logos.
Let me throw it at you this way. Let me give you a little bit of this.
All right.
To chew on.
He's winding up. Here's the pitch.
Since it's inherently a rational system, does that not already bias it? Like, it's, okay. Jung's whole split with Freud was that he saw Freud as projecting his own type onto his patients. But is not Jung projecting his own type onto his system of thought? Proceed! Proceed!
I mean, but I almost was just thinking about, like, he's winding up, and here's the pitch of...
It's too long. It's too long of a sound. I can't take it.
Well, we do what we can.
Well, one day we're gonna have a studio with a sound engineer who can play sounds.
So, anyway, the story of types is that Jung basically developed his theory of types because of his break with Freud. Because he developed a close connection with Freud, and then he felt strongly that Freud was wrong.
Right, I understand. My question is, because it's a rational system, right? I'm guessing Jung...
No, it's
guessing Jung was
rational the same way species is rational. Like, you can say the Homo sapiens, or the family of primates, or the mammals, or the crocodile, like the insects, like the way biologists like divide up species, like technically some of these species are like interbreeding and everything, but it's sort of rational in that way. It's like,
I mean, my point is really broad. I mean, at the risk of getting into another tangent, what is, I consider Jung to be a J, right? Like he's
not a J. I mean,
he's I think of him.
He's an introverted thinking type, which in Meyers-Briggs he would be an INTP.
Interesting.
But that's because the P applies to the extroverted function. So, but he is a J in the sense that he's an introverted thinker, and thinking is the judging function.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm trying to say that his philosophy is really sort of rational. I mean, you might, I don't know, I sort of think I'm misunderstanding. I'm thinking that if you're a philosopher and you think rationally, that makes you a J, but I'm mixing everything up because, thinking...
One thing about Jung is he had to do a lot of just telling people how it is. There's a point at which people are so far behind where you are that you don't want to bother coaching them along the pathway to where you got. You just want to come back and say, okay, this is how it is. It's like, I've been into the deep dark woods, and this is the layout of the deep dark woods. I mean,
that's a good segue into my point, which is forgetting what he was. I'm just saying that since everybody has a type, and since his theory was that you project the type onto the world, does that not, like, doesn't that sort of jeopardize every idea we have? Because we can't escape the type that we have. You know, like we can't, it's going to come out in ways.
Well, typically you escape it by, there's kind of a lifelong progression where you start accumulating your third function, at different periods, and then the fourth function is sort of like the hardest, the most, it's the holy grail. If you can acquire the fourth function, then you're really
Okay, I think I see what you're saying, and this is really important. So you're saying as life progresses, first you become an introvert. First you can tell that somebody's an introvert or an extrovert. And then you can start to tell whether they're, like, because, you said the second, third, and fourth.
Here's the thing, normal adult life, uncomplicated, the normal uncomplicated version of adult life, the one that doesn't get into ethical questions or anything, you have two functions. You have your dominant function, then you have your secondary function. And that's what most people are using most of the time to get through life. Like, when you start getting a moral challenge, when you start becoming concerned with questions of ethics and which is to say, you start becoming a philosopher when your third function starts kicking in. And it contradicts your second function.
I guess I'm getting a little confused when you're talking about the first, second, and third functions.
In other words, you develop as needed.
Do your extroverted functions come out first? Is that how we're...
Well, if you're an introvert, your first one is your introverted function. Your second one's your extrovert function. Your third one is the introverted other one.
So you think it sort of progresses like it switches back and forth between introverted.
Yeah, and the fourth one will be your extroverted.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
That's
it's always E-I-E-I or I-E-I-E as...
So fucking confusing. I mean, I know that you've actually spent a lot of your life studying this.
Yeah, I mean, this is Personality Types and Owner's Manual. This is sort of the basic theory that's laid out there. And I love it because it's not that well known. Like, even people who study
That's why you
types,
love it?
Well, even people who talk about types all the time, like, they don't, it's slightly more marginal. Like, the Meyers-Briggs doesn't get into the third and fourth function. They're not into that stuff.
Yeah, well, I mean, it just adds an element even the Myers-Briggs system is just profoundly confusing because not only do you have to remember what your four letters are, but then you need to sort of twist them around and one points to the other and it's just, what I would...
Yeah, they're wrong. It's kind of like, but remember, I liken it to the QWERTY keyboard. The QWERTY, like keyboard.
Oh yes, I know what that is.
It's like a total mess, but it became the de facto thing, And so it's like, there's a lot of things like that, where it's just, they just became, you can't change it now because nobody's going to understand your new system. They're always going to be confusing.
I admire you for that. Yeah, that's a humble stance to take, comparing these types to,
the
to
system,
a keyboard.
The letters. The Myers-Briggs lettering system, I compare it to the QWERTY
Okay, I see. Alright. Why don't we...
I mean, I believe types are actually a natural phenomenon.
Yes.
Like a tree.
I think that's where we ought to go next, because this is where I fundamentally disagree with you. I think that the type... Excellent, we have a disagreement on our hands. Nice, Zach, coming in with the sound effects. I don't think that these things are innate. I think that they're always...
But my retort would be, of course an ISFP would say that.
Okay, so let's go over what you think I am. So
Yeah.
You think I'm an introverted, ISFP. So I'm an introverted and then my perceiving functions are extroverted.
Yeah.
My perceiving function are intuition and
Yeah.
sensing.
You're an introverted feeling type, and your secondary function is extroverted sensation. That's how you break the Myers-Briggs into the Jungian language. The Jungian, the less commonly used language, but more accurate.
Okay, so I just want to try to understand this because it's so confounding. All right, so my perceiving functions, intuition and sensing, are extroverted, which would mean that that I intuit and sense the outside world more than I do myself.
Well, your secondary function is sensation. Which means in normal life, you act like an extroverted sensation type.
Okay.
You know, like when people see what you're doing, then you're thinking in terms of extroverted sensation. And these people are kind of like thrill seekers to a great extent.
Okay.
You know, they love stimulation and they love immersion, you know.
Okay, so if I'm an introvert and my introverted functions, thinking and feeling, are strongly introverted because I'm a P, then that would mean that, like, do those somehow become, like, compounded by the fact that I'm both an introvert and those are do those two things, like, feed into each other?
Say that again. I call you an IF, or introverted feeling type. That's your dominant function, is introverted feeling.
Introverted feeling. Okay, yeah, so you use the first two letters. You use two letters to say, okay.
Yeah. You're an IF.
It's too confusing. I can't do it. I kind of like your system for this.
You have an 8. You have one of the 8. And then you have another one. And there's only 2 other ones any given one can have, which is where you get your 16.
I want to leave Meyers-Briggs. I want to go back to your system. I actually I think it's much easier to understand. Can you rate myself or you using your, like, give me some IQ scores, right? Like, I know you use,
yeah, I mean, I have myself figured out, and I'm glad because my total scores are high enough that I don't have any problems with the ego. Like, I don't get nervous that, like, my total IQ isn't high enough, you know, which is a big deal because people are very nervous about that type of thing. So in a way, you have to have, like, a very high total in order to be, like, just game for talking about it.
Okay, so in your system, each of the 8, we're back to 8 now.
Yeah.
We have thinking, feeling, sensation, intuition, each of which has within it an extroverted and an introverted function.
Yeah.
So, and each one of those has an IQ. And you're saying that IQ can be generally high, which would mean that somebody would have a higher score in all of them. Is that what you're saying? Because I thought they always balance each other out.
No. You don't believe that some people are more intelligent than other people.
I do, but I sort of feel like you're conflating intelligence with a different form of intelligence. Like, emotional intelligence is not the same as...
Yeah, actually, the 8 Jungian functions cover emotional intelligence pretty well. Those would be the feeling functions.
Right.
And you get even more specific. You literally will have extroverted emotional intelligence, which is extroverted feeling, and introverted.
Right, but you're talking about an intelligence that's different. So, I do believe that certain people are smarter than others. Okay. But what I'm trying to get at is with this whole Briggs system, I felt like everything was sort of balanced, you know, thinking versus feeling, sensation versus intuition, and then P versus J. Like, everything's just like balancing each other out. So I would think that if you add up all the scores in your system, shouldn't they come out to be even?
No, they don't. First of all, P and J don't even exist in the 8 functions.
Right. I mean, because in a lot of ways, like, once you... Like,
I'll give you just... I don't know what to say. Okay, like, I don't know, like, even where to begin. But if you just have, like, test tubes, you know, if you just imagine everybody has, like, a certain amount of liquid in the tube, that's sort of how you get your, you know...
Yeah, the only thing that's throwing me off with your theory, Zach, is that, in theory, if we're going to stretch it to the maximum, somebody could be... the highest level in all of them, and I'm just having a hard time figuring out.
I know, in theory, that could happen, like, which would be awesome. Like...
But you're saying generally people kind of balance out.
No, generally they use what they got.
But I mean, Jung, you know, what I sense from Jung is that he's a careful studier of statistics. He sort of gets the idea that if you observe enough samples, then you find truth. You can group things the way he has. Mm-hmm. So, I'm trying to reconcile these two theories with yours, and what's throwing me off is that if everybody has a rating, that, and there's like certain people can have a generally higher rating than others, before everything sort of seemed to balance out, and now
to me the question is more of, so if the ego, it's the ego which creates the type. Like, the way I look at it is that every baby has no ego. Or they have a very primitive ego. You know, they develop their sense of themselves and this difference between who they are and other people over time. You know, but in the beginning, you just have this, like, sort of natural level of you know, it's an egocentric thing.
Well, I agree with you.
And so you don't have a dominant function.
Except before, right, you don't have a dominant function, but you are an introvert and extrovert. That you have from birth.
I think that that's true. I just believe that personal experience.
Okay, so functions are something you develop through time.
Yeah, well,
experience.
Attachment to a function and differentiate. It's called differentiation. It's when you understand how your function works in the world. But what I'm just saying is that, like, a baby will have these 8 IQs just sitting there. And they won't have an ego attached to any one of them.
Okay, I think this is actually kind of important. So you think that the baby already has it, whereas...
Yeah, they have all their IQs.
It's already determined. Yeah, where I think it's like, it depends on the, like, as they grow up, it's the context that makes the baby into an INTJ or whatever.
Well, yeah, I mean... Well, the thing is, you can actually develop contrary to your strength, to your strongest functions. If you're in a family of sensation types, and you have a reasonably good sensation function overall, but your intuitive function's actually stronger, you may end up being a sensation
You're basically
type.
saying that somebody could act one way, act as one type, and be a different one.
Well, in other words, their latent potential would have been more powerful as a different one. But they never developed.
Do you value them all equally? Do you see them at, like, because you're referring to it as, like, no matter what you are, if you just sort of let that be, then the way you just described it, I mean,
I met
potential.
I met at least one person who was more of an intuitive type, but she grew up around all these, like, sort of hardcore, like, rural, you know, country hick sensation types. And she acted like a total sensation type, but you could tell the psychological tension. I could sense that it was there, but that's not answering your question. I'm trying to reiterate that you can develop a type contrary to your actual natural abilities because you're just surrounded by people who are only using the other thing.
I mean, it's interesting because this is a system that divides the world into buckets, I see it as something that is only true in the sense of what happens. I completely remove any sort of original or natural force that would determine somebody's type. But
the reason that types develop is, did I interrupt you?
No, I just felt like my head was exploding.
Oh, okay.
Because I can't say what I need to say.
Oh, okay. And it's not my fault.
No, it's not your fault.
Okay.
Not this time. You're good at this. All right.
I just keep pressing the same one.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. Thanks, everybody.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes. So, what type is, we've already been over what you and I are. What type is the third person?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so...
And let's go through it slowly. Let's start with...
I figure she's an extrovert.
You figure she's an extrovert.
She is the counterbalance.
I agree.
Alright.
That she's an extrovert.
Okay. I'm right then.
Let's chalk that one down.
She's pretty smart.
Would that make her more of a thinking feeling? Because the next thing we need to do is decide which one of these is extroverted, right? Is that the process you go through?
Like
what's tell me the steps. First we decide introvert. We agree about that. What's the next step?
Basically, you need to find a dominant function. And it's either extroverted or introverted, intuition, thinking, feeling, or sensation. Basically, that's what you need. You need a dominant.
Okay. I think that she's.
We called her an extrovert, so she's going to be an extroverted something.
I'm forgetting what the words are. This system's too complicated.
The
What do you
point
think?
is,
What do you think she
you
is?
need one of these four: intuition, thinking, and feeling. So I just give her extroverted thinking, just because.
I was going to go with thinking too, but I don't know. I don't really have any basis for that. I'm thinking that she thinks, but we all think. So.
We all have thinking, but we don't all use it as our dominant function. Do you want to make her feeling? Just tell me.
No, I don't want to make her feeling. I'm trying to figure out intuition and sensing. Like,
whether she's one of those.
Yeah.
Okay, well, if she's a sensing type, she'll be kind of a thrill seeker a little bit, or she'll like immersion, kind of. That she likes getting into stuff and just being in the moment, and just doing.
She's very in herself. I'll give her that.
Physical,
like I don't know what that would. I mean, to me, that sort of feels like intuition. Like she just is, right? She exists, and she never really questions whether she exists. She's
not a philosopher.
No, she's definitely not a philosopher.
She's an unexamined life.
She's an unexamined life, not even a partially examined life. Shout out!
I think
partially examined life is a podcast.
Yeah, no, I don't care about the shout out, or maybe
you don't care for.
You can do that. Yeah, I don't care for.
It's just this episode we're gonna do.
Yeah, okay.
Don't worry. I just think we need more than this little toy is going to give us.
That's fine.
Okay, let us continue. So, can we say she's intuitive?
I mean, I'm an intuitive type, so I tend to favor the intuitive types.
Well, I like the third person as much as you do.
Right, so it's up to you. I'm going
to go intuitive. I'm putting my foot down.
So she's an extroverted intuitive.
Yeah, okay, well then what's the next step?
She needs a secondary function, which is either introverted thinking or introverted feeling.
Oh, right, it has to be introverted.
Yeah.
I like your system. I like how it's like oscillates. That's cool.
Yeah.
Okay,
it's
so
not
next
even
one
mine, but it is
an introverted one.
Yeah, this is like the Jungian.
So I'm going to go with introverted thinking on this one.
Yeah, she's an ENTP.
She's an ENTP. That's all you have to do. You just have to make those 3 decisions, and then you come up with the type.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
It's really two.
I think it's simpler than the system makes it out to be.
It's simpler, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, your ability to grasp is a factor here. Like your personal.
I know, but I have a good sense of what people like. What works? Like, how do you get somebody to learn something? Right?
Yeah.
I think I can come up with 3 questions.
Yeah.
That would figure it all out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make the deal with you and with the audience, and I'm going to do that.
A dominant function. You just need a dominant function, and then you have to choose a secondary function, and that
sets the whole thing off.
Yeah, that's your personality type. Unless you're a genius, in which case you can exhibit the strengths of more than one type.
Yeah,
you'll still be a type. You can still be a type, and it's just that you'll have an uncanny access to the powers of other types, and that's sort of where people admire and resent you.
I'm gonna go ahead and say that as soon as you come up with a system like this, you can't have a genius anymore.
You can just have a high ranking in enough of the things.
I like the system. I like the fact that it's balanced.
But do you acknowledge the IQ deal?
The IQ troubles me because that means that you could have a genius. I prefer the Briggs because everything balances itself out.
Yeah, and because you don't have to distinguish between smart people and dumb people.
No. You're putting words in my mouth. I do distinguish between smart and dumb people, but I think that that's its own function.
Well, I'll just tell you, people are not normally in the habit of distinguishing smart and dumb people because you can lose a lot of credit with it's a very elitist. People are very against.
Let me pose the question to you this way: do you think that intelligence is something you're born with, or something that you learn?
To me, you have your latent intelligence, and then you have your accumulated skills.
Yeah, I put it all into the latter. I don't think that you're born with a certain amount of intelligence.
Yeah, but
maybe a little bit, but the vast majority, right? I'd say 5% is natural. Everything else is artificial.
You're wrong.
Tell me otherwise. Lay it down in some numbers for me. Give me some math.
I mean, they're both really important.
Are you 50-50 kind of guy?
I guess in terms of, outcome, I'm 50-50 to a large extent. I don't want to, for me, I think you're scared of acknowledging that there's these latent intelligence differences. Because you're scared of that. What I'm scared of doing is offending the people who think it's one or the other. So I tend to just, I go to the 50-50, because then I'm not going to offend either side quite as much. I'm taking...
Wouldn't that make you afraid of offending either side?
I am afraid of offending
but I'm not. I'm not afraid of anything.
Well, you're afraid of one thing being true, like one thing not being true. And I'm more of afraid of... I acknowledge that both sides have compelling... That both matter.
But we can agree that it is one or the other.
No.
No, we can't.
No, because, like Darwinian evolution, you say it always favors the fittest, but the funny thing is, fit in one situation is unfit in another situation. So, right. Like, you could be perfectly fit.
Right, I'm heavily
like
favoring...
if Shakespeare was born, but writing hadn't been invented yet, that wouldn't be an advantage.
Right, and I'm saying far more has to do with the situation. I'm saying only 5% has to do with what you actually are, that 95% has to do with... I think it's admirable to take a stance on this. I encourage you to do the same. What's your number?
Well, also it depends on the level of freedom in a society. If in a free society like ours, what you are is going to matter a lot more, because you'll have the freedom to leave your family, you have the freedom to choose your social groups, you have the freedom to go to a city that favors your interests. And so with all this freedom, we actually are putting a lot of pressure on individuals, and what they are, what their true grit, what they're really made of, tends to come out. So in a way, the freer the society, the more important what you are is.
Yeah, I still take the stance that if you have a society that's completely free, then people will start to exhibit a certain equation. Equality. I do see, the reason I like Jung's theory so much is because he's basically saying that if you exclude all the noise, if you exclude all the statistical noise, like people, we follow patterns, right? And I think that every question can be answered that way. But I think that I don't think we can lose sight of the fact that is still an approximation. We still have to give way to the world being something magical, being something that we cannot ever possibly attain. And yet we still kind of need to make decisions like that, right? Like 5-95, 50-50,
Do you
80-20.
believe, like, Steve Jobs was, like, you think 95% of it was just completely learned?
Yeah, I've made that stance, so I'm gonna go with that.
Okay.
I come down so hard, partially because I know it's gonna provoke you.
Well, you hope it will.
Oh, I can see that it's provoking you.
No, I don't know. I just don't want to cause, people have such strong feelings about the whole issue that it's actually less important to talk about what you really think and more important not to make anybody angry, for the most part.
That's weird to hear you say that, because you take a lot of views that you really don't care about how it makes people feel.
Well, sometimes I'm angry. Sometimes I get mad when people do X or Y, but in this case maybe you got people doing both X and Y, and so I just rather, avoid, like nature and nurture, I don't know, it just seems a totally, it's just not even, it's a solved problem for me. Like, I acknowledge both. I just see nature as being a big deal, and I see nurture as also being a very big deal. And it's what's interesting to me are like these sort of, not genius types. Like people who are sort of, on the line, because those are the people where the nurture will make all the difference. Like in a free society, like genius cream will rise to the top. Like if you're just a total, like, awesome thing or whatever, then you find a way. But if you're just pretty good, that's when nurture comes into it. That's when sort of like social advantage is like the big deal. And most people are in that category. Most people are in that zone where nurture is going to make the difference, or could make the difference.
I see what you're saying. Personally, I think that the debate is so, it's so, we haven't really followed the lines as far as they need to go. I think that in our society, in the modern age, that this question is really unresolved and it's really important because people go back and forth so much. I think that actually most people are like you. They're kind of like, well, there's the world, and well, there's me.
But they'll always have a statement.
But I think that it's really valuable to start to carve it up.
But the people
and to start to see the implications of it.
Another problem is like with the Matrix. There's a lot of people who would rather be in the Matrix. You know.
Yeah.
They don't. That's my issue. It's like there's so many people who wouldn't even want to know the truth if they had access to it. Mm-hmm. So it's more of an issue of like, what is the real reason to disclose the truth if you can't, you try to have to find your audience. I mean, I kind of just want to hear you move beyond the whole, like, well, it's this and it's this. Yeah.
Like that's, you sound Hegelian.
Well, to me, nature is a big deal. Nature is a huge deal. I don't know what to say.
I mean, because I think this really gets at the heart of personality types. Mm-hmm. Like, personality types are a product of nature and nurture.
I just think people's opinion about this subject is often based on their nature. Like, if you're dumb, you won't believe in intelligence.
I get the sense that where I'm 595 with like most of it be going to the world, you're more 95.5, where most of it's in the individual.
Yeah, but I'm kind of deterministic as a whole. I don't think it's just people. I think it's rocks and trees and rain and everything. Like, everything's deterministic,
Food for thought. Alright. I think that's about it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Same place.
Wait,
different
hold on.
time.